Asia, good evening America. You're watching World DNA with me, Raisha Sehgal. And on the show today, after 6 months of wrangling, the U.S. House of Representatives has approved a $95 billion aid package for Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan. The bill will now move to the Senate. We'll be tracking all of that on World DNA this morning. But first, the headlines. U.S. House of Representatives passes a landmark $95 billion package providing aid for Ukraine, Israel and the Indo-Pacific region. The legislation now moves to Senate as a single amendment. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and NATO countries welcome U.S. House passing the aid package. Berlin calls it a day of optimism. Moscow says aid to Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan will exacerbate global crises. U.S. House of Representatives votes to ban video sharing app TikTok if it does not cut ties with its Chinese parent company ByteDance. U.S. officials say the app is used as a tool by Beijing to spread its agenda. Citizens of the Maldives to vote on Sunday to elect members of the country's Majlis or Parliament. It's the first big electoral test for President Moisu's government and policies on India. Thousands demonstrate on the streets of Tel Aviv demanding fresh elections and more action from the Netanyahu government to bring the hostages in Gaza home. Slogans say the government must realize it has no legitimacy to rule. Israel to summon ambassadors of countries that voted for Palestinian membership of the UN. They will be summoned on Sunday for what's been called a protest talk. Travis Head and Abhishek Sharma's blistering opening wicket partnership helped Sunrisers Hyderabad to another victory. The pair scores 131 runs in 38 balls as Hyderabad defeat Delhi by 67 runs. Well, the U.S. House of Representatives has passed a landmark $95 billion aid package that will provide aid for Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan. The first is set to provide $60.84 billion to Ukraine, of which $23 billion will be used to renew U.S. weapons infrastructure for the embattled country. Well, the second one will provide Israel with $26 billion in military aid as it finds itself in an increasingly hostile West Asia. And the third and the final bill is meant for the Asia Pacific, where a large chunk of the allotted $8.12 billion will go towards containing Chinese aggression and protecting Taiwan. The House passed the bill with broad bipartisan support on Saturday, with a united front from Democrats, but a divided camp for the Republicans, with objections from Republican hardliners. The legislation now proceeds to the Democratic majority Senate, which will likely consider the bill on Tuesday and potentially pass it sometime next week. Upon its passing, the bill will finally be signed into a law by U.S. President Joe Biden. And the next report gets you the complete story.
Some U.S. lawmakers cheered and waved Ukrainian flags as the House of Representatives passed a part of a $95 billion legislative package Saturday. The measure, which the House passed in its entirety, provides security assistance to the war-torn country, as well as Israel and Taiwan, over bitter objections from Republican hardliners. The legislation now proceeds to the Democratic majority Senate, which passed a similar measure 2 months ago and is expected to pass this bill next week, sending it to President Joe Biden, who released a statement saying he will sign it into law. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked House Speaker Mike Johnson for the more than $60 billion of aid coming his way, saying it would protect lives and bring a just end to the war that Russian President Vladimir Putin must lose. Johnson, a Republican, agreed with that sentiment.
3 of our primary adversaries, Russia and Iran and China, are working together, and they're being aggressors around the globe. If we turn our backs right now, the consequences could be devastating. So this afternoon, the House acted, and we sent over to the Senate, and it will be transmitted shortly, our supplemental national security legislation.
The vote on passage of the Ukraine funding was 311 to 112, with a majority of Republicans opposing it, including far-right Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. She has taken steps that threaten to remove Johnson from office over this issue.
I do not support Mike Johnson. He's already a lame duck. If we had the vote today in our conference, he would not be Speaker today.
While Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the measure would further ruin Ukraine and result in more deaths in the conflict.
Well, let's also now hear some of the reactions which are coming in from across the globe following the U.S. House of Representatives finally passing the $95 billion aid package. Starting with the House Speaker Mike Johnson, who rather faced down threats of an ouster, stating that the House did not work well and that history would judge.
Вся Україна, наші Збройні Сили, наша Нацгвардія.
Meanwhile, following the passage of $60.84 billion package to Ukraine, President Zelensky expressed gratitude, saying that the aid lifeline will be used by Ukraine to bring a just end to the war, a war that Putin must lose. Earlier on Friday, Zelensky told NATO representatives that Ukraine needed a minimum of 7 Patriot air defense systems similar to Israel's to thwart Russian air assaults.
Про пакет американської підтримки, за який так ми боролися, і дуже вагомий пакет, який відчують і наші воїни на передовій, наші міста і села, які потерпають від російського терору. Сьогодні відбулося голосування Палати представників Сполучених Штатів. Дякую кожному і кожній, хто підтримав наш пакет. Це рішення для захисту.
Western allies lauded the U.S. for strengthening Ukraine's chances at victory. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg hailed the passage of the package as a path to a safer Europe and North America. EU chief Charles Michel also welcomed the move, calling it a clear message to the Kremlin that those who believe in freedom and the UN Charter would continue to support Ukraine and its people. German Foreign Minister also congratulated U.S. lawmakers, terming it a day of optimism wherein the U.S. and Europe stand together on the side of freedom against Putin's war of terror. The Kremlin, however, has not taken kindly to this massive aid boost to Ukraine. Ukraine presidential spokesperson Dmitry Peskov termed the move expected and predictable, warning that the aid will further enrich the United States of America and ruin Ukraine even more by killing even more Ukrainians because of the Kiev regime. Russian Foreign Ministry representative Maria Zakharova took to Telegram, warning that the allocation aid to Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan will exacerbate global crises. Zakharova also said that aid to Taiwan represented interference in China's internal affairs and that support for Israel was a direct path to an unprecedented worsening of the situation in the region. The parliamentary elections in the Maldives today have shaped up to be a crucial referendum on President Mohamed Morsi's tenure. These elections were scheduled during Ramadan and were then subsequently postponed. They're now said to be the most hotly contested yet. Well, let's now first tell you what's at stake for Morsi. For President Morsi, these elections are pivotal. The elections will decide whether his party, the Progressive Party of Maldives, or the PPM in coalition with the People's National Congress or the PNC can actually secure a parliamentary majority. On this will depend ensuring a smooth administration and securing his tenure as president by avoiding parliamentary impeachment. Already, the opposition parties have demanded a probe and impeachment of President Morsi over alleged corruption dating back to 2018. Now, majority in parliament is also critical to minimize the politics of policies during Morsi's tenure. And this will mean that the future of his pro-China leanings, as well as bringing in ambitious infrastructure projects and reforms in housing and judicial sectors. Well, Morsi's tenure has been marked by a series of controversial foreign policy shifts since he took office in November last year, especially his stance on reducing India's military presence in the Maldives and his generally cold stand against India. The pro-China stance has been a major element in his reorientating the Maldives' international relations. His administration has also been criticized for the perceived opacity in agreements with foreign nations and an approach to governance that some view as autocratic. The opposition, led by the Maldivian Democratic Party, MDP, is emphasizing on government accountability and has allied with splinter factions, reflecting a fragmented opposition landscape. Despite controlling the legislature, the opposition's failure to present a united front in these elections could benefit Morsi's coalition. On the other hand, this will mean that the government will be prone to greater politics and challenges in parliament. The ruling party getting a strong majority becomes all the more important. Breakaway factions from both the PNC and MDP are also complicating the electoral dynamics in Maldives. With 93 seats up for grabs and a total of 368 contestants, including a major number of independents, the election landscape is highly competitive. The PPM-PNC coalition, the MDP and various smaller parties and independents will vie for control in Maldives today. And shifting focus to continuous coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. In the latest, Israeli forces exchanged fire with Palestinian militants in the West Bank on Saturday. It was the second day of raid that left at least 2 people dead, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry, that is. Israeli forces launched the raid on the Nur Shams area near the Palestinian city of Tulkarm. The Israeli army released a video that it claimed showed its operation in the area. The Israeli military said that at least 10 of the militants were killed and 8 wanted suspects were arrested. 8 soldiers and a border police officer were wounded in fire exchanges. Now the Tulkarm Brigade's group includes militants from numerous Palestinian factions. At least 3 drones were seen hovering above Nur Shams, where the Israeli military vehicles were massed, and bursts of gunfires were also heard. Now the area houses 1948 war refugees. Israel's military offensive in the Gaza Strip has killed at least 34,000 Palestinians and wounded 76,000 since October 7th. 37 Palestinians have been killed and 68 injured in the past 24 hours, the ministry added in a statement. Hundreds of Palestinians marched in a funeral procession carrying the bodies of the 2 men killed in the settler attack on the village of Aqraba in West Bank. According to the mayor of Aqraba, some 50 armed settlers attacked members of his community and fired at the Palestinian youth, killing 2 of them and wounding others. The Israeli military said it was looking into the incident. Over the past weekend, hundreds of armed Jewish settlers have raided Palestinian villages near the city of Ramallah, blocking roads, setting houses and cars ablaze, and firing at civilians, medics and civilians as well. Israeli officials say that the escalation began after a 14-year-old Israeli went missing in the West Bank. His body was discovered on Saturday in what Israel said was a suspected militant attack. The U.S. State Department condemned the killing of the Israeli teen and also said that it was increasingly concerned by violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. Now, amid the rising tensions between Israel and Iran, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Istanbul, and it was the first meeting since Israel began its campaign in Gaza on 7th of October. Haniyeh was leading a Hamas delegation to Turkey 3 days after he held talks with Turkish Foreign Minister. The meeting took place in Doha. Erdogan's office said that the two sides discussed efforts to supply humanitarian aid to Gaza and reach a fair and lasting peace in the region. Reportedly, both the leaders emphasized that Israel should not benefit from the tensions between Iran and Israel. Now, the statement from his office said that it is important to make efforts that will draw attention to Gaza again. Erdogan also told Haniyeh that Turkey continues its diplomatic efforts for a permanent ceasefire as well as establishment of an independent state of Palestine. Erdogan also told Haniyeh that it is important for Palestinians to act in unity. In yet another set of meetings, Turkish Foreign Minister he held talks with Egyptian Foreign Minister in Istanbul. Both the sides said that tensions between Israel and Iran, as well as other conflicts in the region, will not be resolved until a Palestinian state is recognized. The Egyptian Foreign Minister further said that the main reason of the instability in the West Bank is Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories and Western countries' unconditional support for Israel. Shukri also said that Egypt will host a Turkish delegation to prepare for a visit by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to Turkey in the near future. China is hosting the 19th Western Pacific Naval Symposium on Monday, as the People's Liberation Army Navy marks its 75th founding anniversary. The meeting of top foreign naval officials will be held in Qingdao, and the conference is a show of military diplomacy. China says it is aimed at multilateralism and fair and just sea governance. It will be closely watched for any engagement between China and the U.S. amid tensions in the South China Sea. Now, Beijing says that the military drills held by the U.S. in the Philippines, that poses a threat to neighboring countries, and that they have aroused China's vigilance and opposition. Now, relations between Manila and Beijing have rather worsened over the past year. They have engaged in maritime run-ins in disputed parts in the South China Sea, as well as heated exchanges between their officials. And through this very symposium, the Chinese Navy says it seeks to calm tensions in the region.
愿与各国海军一道，继续坚守多边主义，倡导公平正义，守望相助，通力合作，安全共筑，命运与共，携手推进全球和地区海洋治理。
Ahead of the meeting, the Chinese Navy allowed members of the public on board 4 warships. Among the ships that the public were allowed access to were a submarine rescue ship, a comprehensive supply ship and 2 guided missile destroyers. Russia's newly appointed Navy chief will also take part in the major military conference. Admiral Alexander Moiseev will take part in the Naval Symposium and will also hold bilateral meetings with the Chinese Navy's top brass. Now, this visit comes after U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken criticized Chinese support for Russia's defense industry. He said Beijing is the prime contributor to Moscow's military efforts in Ukraine and through its provision of critical components for weaponry. While cyber attacks targeting financial institutions are on the rise, this surge has experts worried about potential financial instability. Our next report looks at the data behind this growing threat and also examines what steps perhaps can be taken to strengthen the defenses against cyber attacks. Take a look.
The financial world is facing a growing threat: cyber attacks. Since the pandemic, these attacks have doubled, raising concerns about financial stability. The financial sector is a prime target, with nearly 1/5 of attacks aimed at banks. These attacks can be devastating, causing billions in losses and disrupting critical services. The financial impact of cyber attacks is significant. Extreme losses from cyber incidents have quadrupled to $2.5 billion, potentially jeopardizing companies' solvency. Even smaller attacks can cause reputational damage and require expensive security upgrades. These cyber threats are amplified by the financial sector's increasing reliance on third-party tech service providers, which can introduce vulnerabilities across multiple institutions. In South Africa's Lesotho, for example, a cyber attack crippled the central bank's payment system. To combat this growing threat, international cooperation and stronger cybersecurity measures are crucial. Currently, half of all countries lack national cybersecurity regulations for the financial sector. Experts recommend a multi-pronged approach, including improved cyber hygiene, data sharing, and robust response protocols. The IMF is actively supporting member countries in strengthening their cybersecurity frameworks to safeguard the financial system from this hidden economic time bomb. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And in a big story coming from the world of sports, WADA, or the World Anti-Doping Agency, has confirmed that 23 Chinese swimmers were allowed to compete at the 2020 Tokyo Games despite testing positive for a banned substance. According to reports, the swimmers tested positive for a prescription heart drug, trimetazidine, or TMZ. And now, to provide a little bit of perspective, let's just tell you that TMZ is the same drug for which Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva tested positive. She was handed a 4-year ban by the Court of Arbitration for Sport earlier this year. So why were these Chinese swimmers let go? The report further suggests that the swimmers tested positive for TMZ months before the Tokyo Games began in July 2021. Chinese anti-doping body CHINADA notified WADA in June 2021. WADA then reviewed the decision and consulted scientific experts. They then accepted CHINADA's findings that the swimmers were exposed to the drug through contamination. The world's anti-doping body released a statement on Saturday regarding this matter. They said, and I'm quoting here, WADA ultimately concluded that it was not in a position to disapprove the possibility that contamination was the source of TMZ and it was compatible with the data in the file. WADA also concluded that the athletes would be held to have no fault or negligence as such, and based on the advice of external counsel, WADA considered an appeal has now, it was rather not warranted. Along with WADA, swimming's governing body, World Aquatics, which at the time was known as FINA, were also aware of the issue but decided not to act due to a lack of any credible evidence to challenge China's version of events. China's swimming team went on to win 6 medals at the Tokyo Games, including 3 golds. Now, athletes who fail doping tests are usually subject to bans of 2 to 4 years for a first offence, like Bolivia. They are handed a life ban for a second offence. This is not the first instance of Chinese swimmers testing positive for TMZ. Gold medalist Sun Hang was suspended for 3 months in 2014 after testing positive for the drug. Sun later had said that he was prescribed the drug to treat chest pain. Now, this scathing report coming just months ahead of the Paris Games could lead to a tighter scrutiny. China is expected to contend for medals alongside powerhouses like the US and Australia. With that, we call to wrap. Thanks very much for staying with us. You're watching WION World.
Close your eyes. Do you remember me?
As Dev Patel makes his directorial debut with Monkey Man,